Hello, and I'm extremely thrilled because today I have a special guest for you for today's episode. The reason I am excited is because our guest, Josh Boone, has a strong philosophy and an effective enthusiasm to educate and inspire listeners just like me. Josh is a result-driven business expert with more than 15 years of marketing and leadership experience in the B2B and B2C industry. Previously, Josh was co-founder and CEO of Catapult Creative, an award-winning digital agency in Ohio. He is currently the founder and CEO of PureWebResults that deliver innovative and holistic marketing strategy for e-commerce brands. Josh and his consultancy are known to transform dreams into reality. Welcome, Josh.
Wow, that's quite an intro. Thank you.
I'm glad you love it.
How are you doing today?
I was just so impressed with your background. But before I start with my questions, I just want to say I'm so grateful to have you here. Today, I want to focus our conversation on two of my favorite topics. The first topic I want to focus on is customer experience in the e-commerce market. And then the second one, I wanted to focus on healthy lifestyle for e-commerce entrepreneurs. So are you ready?
Let's do it.
Let's do it. Okay, so first question is, I love listening to entrepreneurs' inspiration behind their business. So tell us your inspiration behind PureWebResults.
Yeah, so I had a lot of different paths on my journey. I guess going all the way to the beginning, like I got started when I was about 13. This is about 17 years ago. I basically, my dad, he had a small business, he had a tree service, and I kind of grew up in the tree industry, you know, talking to clients and all this other stuff. So it seemed kind of natural, looking back, that I would get into consulting and working with people, since that was a lot of what he did. And you know, it's kind of my DNA. But so I got into websites, just building websites just as a hobby. And I'm like, I'm going to build my dad a website. So I did. And then I'm like, okay, well, how do I get people to this website now? And so I started, you know, back in the crude wild west days of SEO, where you quite literally could just put some keywords in it and boom, like you would rank. Because I mean, there was like no competition around here. You know, I'm in Dayton, Ohio. So like a small business in Dayton, Ohio didn't have a website really back then. So it was really easy. And he was just, you know, he was getting all these calls, and I was just like, wow, there's a lot of power in this. So then, you know, his small business friends started asking me to build websites for him. Next thing I know, I'm like 13, 14 freelancing, building websites for businesses. And then, so I started doing that. I started building my own websites, and I had some communities, and I'm like, okay, well, this is starting to cost me money. How do I'm 13. Like, how do I like pay for this? So I'm like, how do I make money off of this? And so I started getting into affiliate marketing, e-commerce, that whole thing. Yeah. And, that's better, but it was fascinating. So I started doing that. And then I just kind of went from there. I had a network of affiliate sites. I had like one or two e-com shops that I ran, and I did that for a while. And then I kind of got burnt out on that and decided to go agency side. And I start working more with those small businesses again. So started an agency, did that for about 3 years, and it started going really well. And then we merged with another, me and a co-founder merged with another another kind of local team of people, and it just exploded from there. Like, we ended up having a team over 10 people. We had downtown retail spot. We were doing, you know, quite a lot of revenue. We won awards. We were doing all this stuff, and it was really cool.
Wow.
And I felt really, you know, proud of my team and the work we were doing, and everything was great until it wasn't. Like, I was working 100+ hour weeks. I burnt out, and my heart wasn't in it anymore. And, you know, I just kind of asked myself, like, do I even want to do this anymore? And, you know, why? And I spent a lot of time, you know, we brought some consultants in, and, you know, I talked with a lot of, you know, older, more experienced people. And like, I think there's probably a way to turn it around, but I was like 23, 24. I was still a kid. And I was just like, I don't want all this right now. So I sold my portion of the business, bought an RV, sold everything, just traveled the country for 2 years, and it was wonderful.
Nice.
Yeah, it was crazy, and it was really cool. And when I was on the road, I mostly just took those 2 years off, but I did do a couple consulting projects, partially because it was just friends who were either starting businesses or, you know, they got, you know, kind of director or, CMO positions at some of these companies, and they wanted some help. Uh, but really it kind of came down to, I just wanted to test, like what's the next thing that I work on? And I wanted to kind of test the model. And I really enjoyed the consulting work. It was really fun. It was all the cool stuff that I liked, the relationships, working with clients and all the stuff from the agency world, but it didn't have all the nonsense where you got to worry about employees and you have all this overhead and you're spread so thin. And
Right.
so I was like, okay, I like this. This is cool. But then I'm like, I want to solve a real problem, like a hard problem. I don't want to just consult. Like I want to really actually try and work towards something. I'm a very mission driven
Yeah.
person. So I wanted to have a really hard problem to solve that would keep me busy. So
Yeah.
when I started working with these businesses, I started working with a lot of teams that were scaling really, really fast. And they get the year 4, 5, 6, and they've got a 75, 100 employees, 150 employees, and like all their processes start breaking down. And
Mm.
it's not just like logistically, it's not just strategically, it's also just culturally. The whole culture starts changing. People start feeling like they're not part of a team anymore that's cohesive. Everyone's working in silos, and there's a lot of demoralization, and
Yeah.
that is not good from a mental health perspective, and it's just not good for the business either, from a revenue standpoint. It just doesn't work very well. So the last two and a half, I guess going on 3 years now, yeah, time flies, man. But
It's when you're having fun.
yeah, and it's been very fun. It's been a lot of work, and a lot of challenges, but good ones, fun ones. And so we've been working with a lot of these teams and figuring out, okay, what are all these gaps that start when people start growing? What are all these strategic gaps, and what are all these cultural gaps, and how do we start solving a lot of these kind of institutional problems? And then the other thing that we started with about a year and a half ago was working with early stage startups, and how could
Mm.
you build this kind of framework and this foundation from the beginning so that it scales with them and hopefully avoids a lot of these pitfalls and growing pains that a lot of these brands deal with. Now, don't get me wrong, you're going to have growing pains regardless. But there was a lot of very easy way. There's a lot of low hanging fruit here when you're setting up these businesses to be able to scale a lot more holistically and have a
Right.
lot more healthy scaling. So that's really what we've been working on predominantly, and it's been really, really cool. And I feel really good about the work, not just because of the revenue and stuff that we're able to bring for businesses, which is cool, but really it's the people, it's the stories, like how people start feeling empowered and they feel listened to and they feel like they're aligned again and they're working together, and like that's really what gives me the energy in all this, and I really enjoy it.
Yeah, a few things that you've mentioned just resonated with me. I love how you asked yourself about, why you're doing things. And I feel like that's a massive thing that we should be asking ourselves constantly, why we're doing that. And I'm glad you took that time off, to travel and to ask yourself that why. And that will be your driving force for anything you do. So that really was amazing to hear that you really took the time to question yourself. And second thing that I really love that you said was, empowering people, because it's the people that at the end of the day that matters, and they're the ones who's going to help you succeed in your organization, will help you grow, will help you fulfill your mission. And I'm so happy to hear that you and your organization, you're focused on the people, to help deliver excellent work. And so that's amazing to hear.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of times when I start talking with these businesses, it's it's kind of funny almost, where like some of these businesses are quite large and established, and I'll go in, I'll say saying, okay, well, what is this business to you? And the founders, founders, or the directors or whoever else I'm talking to will tell me one thing, and then I'll start talking with the employees and they'll tell me something else, and then I'll say something. And then often, like when you'll look online, like even like social media, PR, like the blogs, like for example, if they're a product like e-commerce based business, they're like people are doing product reviews, or they're doing YouTube reviews or whatever. How are they describing the company? And often it's all completely different things. And
Mm.
sometimes it comes down to them just using very different wording, which even that matters from a
Matters, it
branding
does.
perspective. However, sometimes it's conceptually completely different. And what happens, I found, is that that's really insidious, because your idea of what this business is and my idea might be very different. And the thing is, inevitably, once one of those ideas starts taking the lead and going,
Mhm.
people are going to start feeling really demoralized when the company's going in a direction and they're like, this isn't aligned with what I thought this was. And a lot of
Mhm.
times people get hired on and the company's one thing. And, the leadership is kind of like navigating things and they're making all these changes, which they might have very valid reasons for why they're pivoting and making these changes. But a lot of times it doesn't get passed down and communicated very clearly to the team until it's something like, we're going to reposition, or we're going to pivot, we're going to rebrand. And or it's even just like the outward messaging starts completely changing and there's massive gaps in that, the communication there, and people are like, wait, I don't like the direction that this is going in.
Yeah.
And that causes real problems. So yeah, I think it's really important to ask yourself, as a founder, entrepreneur, even freelancer, or even if you work for a brand that you really like, doesn't matter what it is. Like, I think it's important as a human being to ask yourself why. What am I optimizing for? Why am I
Mhm.
doing what am I doing? And why as a team are we doing what we're doing? And if you're not aligned, like if you are personally not aligned with the mission of the brand or whatever else, then you gotta fix that. And if you are not aligned with your team and what the mission is, then that's a whole nother, even larger issue you got to deal with. And you either need to try and realign the mission and the team with what you want, or you need to exit and let them take it and do what they need to do with it. So
I agree 100%. Josh, man, you're wise beyond your years. Love it.
I look at my life as a series of David Bowie characters. It's like I do something for 2 or 3 years, and I'm like, okay, now let's start over and let's do something interesting. So
So you mentioned about people, and one important type of people is the customers. And so I wanted to ask my next question about customer experience, based on your experience, is as e-commerce competition continues to increase for shoppers' attention, the customer experience has become more and more important. So what is your tips and tactics for business owners to create a very valuable and unique experience for their online customers?
yeah, I mean, we live in the best possible time to do that, to create like everything. Like, so there's a lot of brands that I know that, either colleagues or clients of mine, or even just things that I see out in the abstract, like in industry, where
Mhm.
they're kind of freaking out because they're like, oh, COVID and this pandemic and, all this other things.
Yes.
It's completely, and don't get me wrong, there's real disruptions for sure.
Yes.
But I think that if they took a step back and they actually looked at the opportunity, this is very much so an opportunity. Like, let's say you were a brand that had a lot of in-person meetings, or you were retail or whatever else. It's like, okay, everybody in your industry is now struggling with those problems. It's not just you.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
how can you try and replicate that in-person and personal connection online? And if you can't figure that out, well, it's kind of innovate or die. Like maybe you're just kind of burnt out. You need to take a break,
Right.
and that's a whole nother conversation. But I think, for example, all right. So one company, they basically were in the kind of home office area and industry. They're making these products for it, and it really sucks because we were, from a timing perspective, there was a lot of low hanging fruit in that industry
Mhm.
that a lot of people weren't paying attention to, and we were actually proactively working on setting them up for the next year on kind of trying to some of those emerging areas, start proactively kind of owning that space. Then you have COVID, and
Yes.
like everybody is pouring money into that space, and it's just like,
Yes.
well, that's not a secret anymore, and that's not a low-hanging fruit, that's not opportunity. And it almost seemed demoralizing, but I was just like, no, this is amazing for you guys, because now all not only is the demand there, but all these
Mhm.
larger companies are pushing a tremendous amount of marketing dollars and awareness into the need for these types of products that a lot of people didn't even know existed. And the thing is that they are craftsmen. This brand they're craftsmen. They make amazing products that most of these larger brands just cannot compete with. And that's one thing. The second thing is that they have again, they're craftsmen. They have actual, product designers and woodworkers and all these other things. These people making these amazing products, they're artists. And so
Mm-hmm.
like they have this wealth of talent, and they've also spent years interviewing their customers and really understanding their needs and how they work. I'm like, this is Thunderdome, man. This is the time. Like this is it. So I'm like, where are all your people online? Like Reddit, for example, is huge. Reddit's huge with like the home office space, like people working from home. They're developers, they're writers, they're programmers,
Right.
or whatever else, graphic designers, videographers, podcasters, whatever. And
Yeah.
there's all these communities. There's like, and I'm like, you should go on there and you should just you should reach those audiences. You should have authentic conversations. And a lot of people are very afraid of Reddit because they're brutal. I've been on Reddit since, I don't know, like over a decade. Like, so like I've been on Reddit for a long time. And like, I can tell you that they are pretty brutal, but it's just because they don't like inauthenticity. You have to be
Oh, they like
authentic.
real people. Like they want
Yes.
real people. Gotcha.
And if you are a solopreneur or you're a freelancer or you run a business or if you are anything but a huge corporation, you can be vulnerable and you can
Mm-hmm.
take chances that corporations cannot. So you can go
Mm-hmm.
on there and be real and say, hey, we're product designers, we're making products. We actually been like on Reddit, we've been looking at the threads of what you guys are doing. Here is what we've seen, like you guys, like the biggest issues you guys are dealing with. uh Hack this, hack away at this. Like, what could we do? What is more ideas? Like, what are the things? And then what happens is you start crowdsourcing basically, and you are now working with the community and you are being a part of the community. You're not trying to just
Mm-hmm.
advertise. You're being a part of the community and you're engaging with them. And they're like, wow, this is cool. Okay. And that you start doing it. And then you're like, okay, we're going to like go back in our workshop. We're going to go back in the back cave and we're going to tinker around and like make some stuff. And then you come back and say, hey, these are some prototypes that we have. Like, what do you guys think? What could be better?
Right.
Like, how do you guys use this? And then you start having that conversation. And now they're like, now it's a thing. Now like there's this story and like people know who you are. And if they're involved in
Mm-hmm.
that community, they're going to remember. And the moderators will probably remember like, oh, okay. Oh yeah, they're the cool brand. They're okay. They're all right. I don't need to and they're fine. They get a pass.
Right.
And then you can come back and later and say, hey, we designed this product, like, and we're going to give you guys a massive discount because you guys helped make this. And like, we love you guys. And what's the next thing that we should work on together as a community? And then it's a thing. You know what I mean? Like, there's so many ways that you could. That's just one example of using like social media. That's not even getting into like the experience on your website, like how you could start building communities and start connecting people. There's so many ways you can use online platforms to try and cultivate that kind of that customer experience and almost like localize it online and make it feel real. And I'm seeing some brands do some really
Mm-hmm.
innovative stuff. Those are the ones that are going to thrive. And all the ones that are kind of coasting, they're just like, oh, COVID, it sucks. It's just like, well, yeah, it's just reality. Again,
Yeah.
innovate or die. What are you going to do about it? And again, like this is a great time. Don't get me wrong. If you're someone you're a marketplace and you directly competed with Amazon,
Mm-hmm.
um, and you don't really have a huge value proposition, man, yeah, I feel you might. This is a brutal time for you. But if you're a direct to consumer brand and you actually had some real value and you can do things that the Amazons of the world can't because you can be scrappy and you can be vulnerable and you can take chances people won't,
Mm-hmm.
this is it. Like, I was watching Hulu with my partner last night, and there's these commercials, and they are so tone deaf. They have no soul. And I'm like, I would never buy any of your products. And then I forget what it was, but there's one brand that came on, for the life of me, it escapes me. But like they came on, and I was just like, wow, that was really cool. It's kind of edgy, and they were taking
Right.
chances, and it felt like a YouTube video. You
They took
know,
a risk,
they
right?
took
And
a
it was,
risk, and I was
yeah.
just like, I know that, next time I see an ad for them, I'll be like, oh yeah, it was those guys. Oh, yeah, that was cool. And it was a net positive. I probably won't buy their product right now, but I might down the road. I don't know. And
Yeah, they
that's
left
that's
a mark
that's that's
in
good
your head.
advertising. But
Yeah.
like, the other stuff that I saw, I'm like, that was terrible. Like, so like that was annoying. I don't
Yeah.
let me just watch my Venture Brothers and get on with my life.
I hear you. I really love your mindset that no matter how tough the time is, try to think first of all positive and try to use it find a silver lining and try to use it to your advantage, because life is going to be filled with, challenges, whether it be personal or at a global level. You need to have the right mindset to be able to deal with those challenges. And I love how you had that mindset, and you're sharing that, mindset with everyone to become a better person. So I love that. And I love how you're finding opportunities where you can be authentic and real rather than, just putting a face or being fake. And I think that's what I would love to communicate out in the world, is try to be authentic. And because everyone is meant to be authentic and unique and find innovative ways of, dealing with solutions and problems. And so I just really love how you are advising all of that. We need to be more real, more authentic, find, places where you can get honest feedback from customers and, even coworkers, and be able to leverage that, back into your business or your personal life. So I really like those points that really, hit me hard.
Yeah, I mean, I had kind of an awakening when I went on the road, and
Mm,
it was really interesting because, again, like I was an early 20 something year old, founder that went from, basically just freelancing and just kind of, marching to the beat of my own drum to, now we had a team of 10, 12, whatever it was. I don't know. Like
yeah.
we
Yeah.
had, and I was just like, God, there's so much responsibility. Like I really struggled with identity, like the idea of who I
Yes.
was supposed to be. Like, who am I supposed to be as a leader? Who am I
Yes.
supposed to be as a business owner in my community? Because that's the thing, that our community, like here in Ohio, like it was, we're part of the Rust Belt, and like when GM and the car manufacturers left, it really destroyed this community. It really hurt it a lot, and it started bouncing back right around the time when we kind of started happening, and the downtown community was very small and we were growing, and we tried to be as much of a positive influence as possible, and I was just started thinking like, okay, who am I in that context, like in
Mm,
the greater community, in the small business community? Who am I as a leader? Who am I as this and that? Who am I just as a person? And that's a thing that's people in their 20s struggle with just as a whole, let alone all that. And the thing
yeah.
that is so crazy is like, I'm not just responsible for myself and for the team, but it's like I'm financially responsible for them, and the things that I do affect
Yes.
them, but also their families and
Oh, yeah.
everything else. And
Yes.
like, this is a lot of weight. And when I went on the road, I got to just experiment with just being me, and I
Mhm.
learned a lot about vulnerability. And
Yeah.
when before, I was always a very warm person once I got to open up, but I had a lot of social anxiety, and I was very introverted externally. But then when people would meet me, I was like really extroverted and outgoing. People were like, well, who is this guy? You know? And so it's just like, if people didn't know me very well, they thought it was kind of like they were neutral on me. Like,
Yes.
he seems okay. I don't know. It's like, but I hear good things or what. I don't know. They're neutral, or they kind of were just like, not my. I don't know. He seems kind of stuck up. But then
Mhm.
once I got to know people, they're like, wow, you're really warm and nice, and people for the most part like me. But I was basically just like, how can I unearth that person and bring it to the surface? And that's what the road really was just experimenting with all these various different things. And to tie it back is like, I, it opened up so many doors. Like,
Mm,
even just from a career standpoint, professionally, I mean, I wear my heart on my sleeve. I tell everybody exactly what I think. If I don't think we're a good fit,
yes.
actually, a couple of weeks ago, I was talking with somebody,
Yes.
and like immediately, I just did not click with them. And
Mhm.
it was they reached out to me to help them with some marketing, and I'm just like, he was very narcissistic kind of person, and I'm just like, hey man, here's a couple things I'd recommend that you suss out. Here's some
Mhm.
of my recommendations, but I don't think we're a good fit, and I can't help you. And he's like, oh, well, just shoot me over a proposal and we'll do it. I'm like, no, I'm sorry, I don't think we're a good fit. And like,
Yes.
that's something that I wouldn't have done, many years
Before.
ago. And
Yeah.
the thing is like, there was another person that was on the call, and like, I think they were like, wow, I actually really respected that. you know,
Right.
and it's just like, so even when you know, you're, my point is like that authenticity, there's a lot of people that want to work with me now just because they're like, you're honest and I trust you. And
Yes.
that goes, and that extends to everything, you know. So I think like as people, we fear being vulnerable for all of the insecurities, but also from a business standpoint, now you're adding a whole nother extra layer onto it. Like
Yes.
how is that going to hurt my career? How is that going to hurt if you have a team? How is it going to hurt them? And I would just say that like the the best thing you can do is just start being more vulnerable. And as
Mm-hmm.
long as you're doing it from a sincere perspective, you're probably going to turn some people off. But the thing is that there was a shelf life on what that relationship was anyway. You know, there already was a clock ticking and you just didn't even
Yes.
know it was there.
Yeah.
So what you're doing is just getting rid of those people faster, and bad business partnerships, bad business opportunities, whatever else. And what you're doing is uncovering the people that really are truly worth having in your life, both as business and personal.
Yeah.
And the people that it's going to resonate with, you might turn off some people, but the people that it resonates with, it's going to resonate with them really, really strongly. And that is like the tide that raises all ships. Um, and that you can do that. That's a marketing strategy too. It's just like the Reddit thing.
Ah,
It's being
yeah.
authentic. That matters.
Yes.
Like the brands that I see, there's one brand that's a supplement company that's on Reddit and active. And like the owner is just like, oh yeah, all these brands are terrible. He's like, this brand, we did all these different tests, and
Mm-hmm.
like the percentage of what the actual supplement is supposed to be is like half or a quarter what it is. And he's saying all this stuff, and you know, there's a lot of brands say that kind of thing, but he is personally, like, you could tell he's offended by it. Like as a consumer, he's
Mm-hmm.
mad about it, and he's like, this is dishonest. And then he starts telling you how the industry really works, and he starts telling you how his business works, and then he's telling you like how, well, all the almost OCD, like obsessive things, like he treats his business like an art project almost.
Yes.
And like he's doing this, and I'm like, I'm buying from that guy. I'm actually in the process of moving all my supplements over to him, because they test every single batch for purity. They do everything. They put all the stuff online. They do all, and some brands do that, but it's the I know that guy is so obsessed with authenticity and doing the right thing.
Yes.
Like I'm like, I trust that over some, faceless corporation. And
Hands
so
down.
like I'm going with that guy, even if it costs a little bit more money.
It's
And
working.
exactly. Yeah, even just the balls to do that, I want to support it. Like it's
Of
it's like
course.
it's I'm like, hey, keep fighting the good fight. It's awesome. So yeah, I completely agree, and I hope that like as we start having more conversations, like all the conversations that you're having with people, the conversations that I'm having, and we start having these conversations of like vulnerability, that helps
Mm-hmm.
change this culture, because like I think that's why we find ourselves in this kind of mental health. Uh,
Yeah,
there's just no
issues.
community, you know?
Yeah, I agree. I think it's so important as a leader to ask, what values do you stand by? And I feel like I connect a lot with people, our leaders, who are vulnerable and transparent, because that's who I am myself. Because I've noticed my relationship with people, when I'm vulnerable, there's a deeper connection that just occurs, and it's just so organic, and it just, again, it goes back to my value of being authentic. And I think that it's so important to be vulnerable, that you can create that connection, and to be transparent. Like, I think, you know what, if we make a mistake, just say it, and, be honest about it and be transparent. And then as a team, we just work through those mistakes and then move forward. But unfortunately, there's a lot of leaders who are like, nope, I'm right. This is it. And, they have a certain mindset, and it's not a growth mindset. And I feel like then in the long run, they won't succeed. I feel like the
Mhm.
true leaders of tomorrow, or even of today, is you have to be vulnerable, you have to be transparent, and you have to be authentic. And looks like you have those qualities, Josh.
It sounds like you do as well. So cheers to that.
I'm working on it. So yeah. Oh, so this is so great. Oh my God. I think we can talk for hours, but we need to move forward. If it's okay, I'll move forward to the
Oh,
next
go for it.
question.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the next question I had for you was, as brick and mortar stores are shifting to the online space, one of the disadvantages of the shift is the lack of physical interaction with the customers. And we all know that nonverbal communication is an important aspect of customer relationships. So how can these physical interaction be properly compensated in an e-commerce space where there is no, physical interaction?
Yeah, I think, kind of piggybacking off the kind of Reddit conversation, like that would be
Mm-hmm.
one really low-hanging fruit way I would go about doing it. Um, how do you take that, to the next level is one thing. So I think what a lot of these brands are doing, I see a lot of kind of coaches and consultants and, people like podcasters and such that are putting together these communities, like these Slack channels and such. And I think you could totally do that as a brand. And I think using something like a Slack where Slack might have been seen more as a kind of business messaging app pre-COVID, but now
Yes.
everybody's using it for everything. I mean, I've got a Slack channel just for some of my friends to collaborate on stuff, so it's just
Mm.
like everyone's kind of using it. Why not do that? Why don't you try and like bring your community together and kind of create this tribe? Like that's one great way of doing it. Another thing, the idea that I've been kind of toying around with a couple clients of mine and just kind of talking with some colleagues is like this idea of, if let's say you're an ecom business, how could you kind of use some of the aspects of B2B businesses like services and kind of like make them compliant? So like, let's say, for example, you're an ecom business. What if you had like a concierge or like some sort of productized service that you
Mm-hmm.
could offer your customers that somehow leads into it? So one example was like, the work from home company or whatever. I was just like, hey, what about if you offered your customers, they could pay a certain amount of money and you'd actually help your product design team, your design team actually help them come up with the best layout, because they've spent years and years and years studying how their customers use their products for maximum productivity.
Mm-hmm.
So we have guides that like we're developing and such, and a bunch of other resources, but like what if you could actually do that and help them? And I don't know if they're ever gonna run with that or not, but like this is something, that's an idea there you could go with, where it's just like you're you're more or less thinking like, how can you repurpose some of your team to directly engage with your customers,
Ah.
and they'll pay for it. And the thing is now who your real customers are. I don't want to say real customers, but like almost like your VIP customers or something. And then you
Mm-hmm.
can take those people and say, hey, you paid this extra money for like the concierge or VIP service where you got to speak with actual team and they got to help you. At part of the benefit of that is you also get added to our VIP group of people that really want to take their productivity to the next level.
Mm-hmm.
And boom, you now curated it with people that are not only customers, but they're customers that are willing to spend even more money. And all of those people have had a personal interaction with your actual team. And now you can start using them, engaging with them and saying, hey, why don't you help us open source, like, why don't you come up to help us with product design, why don't you help us with this, why don't you help us with that? And you can use them as a sounding board, and then they become your brand ambassadors.
Yeah.
There's so many ways you could do it. I mean, so many ways you could take that idea, even just the basics idea, and run with it in a bunch of different directions. But that's what makes it so fun, is that you get to make this up as you go. And it's what's crazy to me. And this is one of the reasons that actually inspired, going back to your original question, inspired
Mm-hmm.
the consulting work that we're doing now. Is I've worked with hundreds and hundreds of businesses, if not close to 1,000 at this point. I don't know. I stopped
Nice.
counting a long time ago, but I've worked with a lot of businesses over the years, and of completely different industries, like
Yeah.
B2B, e-com, D2C, what, it doesn't matter, retail, government contractors, universities, I mean, government organizations. Like, I mean, I've worked with just about everybody. And what's interesting is that there's solutions and ideas that are kind of like common knowledge in certain industries,
Yeah.
but other industries deal with a lot of those same kind of systemic issues, and they are completely unaware that there's solutions. So one of the things I've been doing is almost like a DJ, like taking all the best elements from all these
Yes.
different industries and
Yes.
putting it to there. So like one example that I commonly like tell people about is Merrill Lynch developed this system called the supernova model. And it was
Mm.
basically their client optimization and retention system for being, advisors. And there's a book called The Supernova Advisor
Mm-hmm.
that when I started working with one of these wealth management companies, they were like one of the top 50 wealth management companies in the world, or in, sorry, the United States.
Right.
And we started working with them, and immediately they handed us a stack of these books. They're like, you and your team have to read this. Like, it was that important that, like, before we'd even do any work together, you need to read this book, because this book completely changed our business. This is a reason why we're so successful right now, and it is
Really?
that important. And so I read it, and I'm reading this as, at the time, an agency owner, and I'm like,
Yeah.
this applies just as much to us as a marketing agency as it did to them as a, financial advisors. And it blew
Yeah.
my mind. And like, one example is that there's this thing called min max. It's the minimum amount of investable assets that a client has to have for them to qualify, and then a
Mm-hmm.
maximum amount of clients that you're going to have. And so that you set these boundaries, and then there's like a whole client retention system where it's like, you touch base, you have like a small little touch base, like a phone call once a month, you have like quarterly kind of like strategy calls, you have a 6 month, 6 month face to face. Basically every 6 months you do face to face, or if they're super far away, like once a year basically. And that system keeps everything going, and it keeps the client engaged, and it does everything else, and they had it all systematized. I'm like, you could totally take this and use it in the consulting, advising industry, whatever. But I'm like, you could even do that if you're not only a B2B business, but if you're ecom as well. How could you have that kind of model of customer engagement where you're engaging with them in some capacity? What, instead of that being like a personal one-to-one thing, that was as a group. And you had those kind of things where you
Mm-hmm.
started bringing your best people together, where it's like once a month you guys like had this kind of like touch base, and with the, whatever. There's so many different ideas just even off of that. But that right there, is whatever things that you're dealing with, what are other industries where they have long had to deal with those problems? Start researching that. So
Ah, okay.
I
Yep.
actually, again, like, I've been looking a lot at what management consulting companies have been doing. Like now, as we're doing consulting with marketing, I've been looking at what they're doing. I've been looking at like what all these other industries are doing. Like when we were working with a shoe company, and I was looking at, what is Tesla doing in their marketing? What is Apple doing? Because,
Even though
like,
you're working for a shoe industry, you were looking at totally different industry and trying to find how you can connect them.
yeah, because the kind of people that would be, interested in those shoes are a lot of the same people that are in Silicon Valley and whatever else. And that
No.
and so it's like, how can you take the learnings from all these different industries and use it?
Right.
And it's almost like, again, it's kind of like the David Bowie DJ thing, where it's just like, okay, I'm gonna
Yes.
take a little bit of this, take a little bit of that, a little bit of
Yes.
funk, a little bit of this, a little bit of,
Yeah.
I'm gonna take all these different elements, kind of make it my own.
Yes.
Uh, yeah, I feel like people get really stuck and very, this is what's happening in an industry. And I think
Yeah.
that's what I think, connecting all the dots, insecurity. They're
Yes.
worried that it's not going to work, and they don't want to take chances. They're like, well, nobody else in the industry does it. I actually, back when we had the agency and we were doing a lot of developing websites, a lot of customers were afraid to build anything, any website, even though, like, there was very much so a tremendous amount of case studies and even our own clients, of how this type of design, like a modern website that's responsive and mobile friendly and all these other things, how it works. They were like, well, nobody else has a mobile friendly responsive website, or nobody else has a website like this. Everybody has one of those old school brochure websites, because they're all government
Hmm.
contracting agencies or government
Hmm.
contractors. They're like, we're afraid to do that. We don't think we're going to do that. And I'm like, you realize that you could be the leaders. This could be the thing that puts you in the lead, right?
Right.
And then they're just like, nah, don't want to do it. And it's just like, okay, you're innovate or die. Like, you're probably on your way out,
Yeah, because they
and
don't
like,
have the open mindset,
yeah,
to learn from other places and other, we'll say, industry, as you mentioned. And I think that's super important as a leader or even as a person, is to have that open mindset and I love the idea of like researching other industries and learning from them, take the best from that, and then apply it to your organization or your own personal life. And I think that's a fantastic way to live a life, and I love that advice.
yeah, for sure. It's kind of funny, as a quick little aside.
Yeah.
That example of like, oh, they were afraid to do whatever. That came up like a month or two ago, and I just kind of looked at client. We ended up like not stopping working with them because we were just like, can't help you, you know, like you don't want to take our advice, can't help you. I kind of looked at them. I wonder what they're doing now, and they had everybody in there, all their competitors that I remember, all have
Yeah.
websites that were
Yeah.
basically like what they didn't want, and they now have one too, and it's not
Yeah.
very good. And so I'm just like, it's funny. If you could have led everything, you know, you could have led that, but now you're trailing behind, and they still, it's just, you know, it is what it is. You know, you can't
Yeah.
teach a man to fish and such. You know, you just can't. Some people you can't help. You know.
Yeah. You just give your advice, and if they listen, great. If they don't, anyway, what can you do, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, so then my question is that did this approach, your thinking like this, help you create this clinical and data-driven approach that you use for your client?
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm always looking at, okay, how can we test assumptions? Because, you know, like I'm
Yeah.
all about being creative and trying. I'm all about experimentation. I am all about 100%. I'm a
Yeah.
novelty addict. I love trying new things. I'm like, if there's a new restaurant, a new thing, I'm like, I want to go there. And like, I'm the same way with marketing. And, you know, I try to work with businesses where, I mean, I'll tell them that. I'm like, hey, this is an experimental idea. Do you want to go down this rabbit hole with me? You want to try some weird stuff? And, you
Yes.
and I always think about it. Again, it goes back to like, the small business mentality. I grew up with my dad with the tree service where it's just like,
Yes.
okay, money in, money out. It has to make sense. So like, I'm always thinking about that. Okay, does this actually make sense? But then also like, I'll talk with, you know, the founder of the company, be whatever. I'm like, okay, can we have some, can I have a budget, and can we just kind of do this test? Because I think
Right.
this is going to work, but I want to test it. The gains could be huge. And, you know, most of the time they're like, yeah, let's do it. And the thing is like, one extra element to that is I use that kind of small business mindset to vet the initial idea, but then there's also, I'm thinking of how can we cap the downside? And
Right.
so like Richard Branson talked about when he was doing Virgin Airlines, like he more or less talked with, you know, whatever the main, like Boeing, whatever the company was that he bought the planes from. He basically negotiated a deal where after 2 years, if it didn't work out, they would buy the planes back.
Ah,
Amazing.
okay.
So he
Yeah.
capped his downside. So I'm always thinking about, okay, well, how can we repurpose this? So like one example of what we did was we did a brand messaging test. So remember in the beginning where I was just like, hey, all these people had a different idea of what the brand was. Well, I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, let's test it. Let's just test it.
Yes,
Let's just
I
see what the
see.
data says. So what we did is we interviewed, you know, as much of the core team as we could, looked at all the customer surveys that they had done because they already did extensive amount of that. And the questions
Yes.
that they asked were fairly good. So like we didn't really need to do any new ones, at least at that stage. And then we went through and looked at, you know, again, how people in the press were talking about them, social media, bloggers, reviewers, all this other stuff. And we basically boiled it down to about 18 different concepts of like
Mm-hmm.
what the brand was, what their positioning was, what made them unique, why would customers want to buy from them?
Right.
And then we boiled it down to four initially that we're going to test that had them, you know, the kind of buckets almost that kind of everything, all those 18 kind of fell within. And we
Yeah.
got down to four initial messages. One was a control, which was the one that they had been running, and it was good messaging.
Okay.
But then we had three other ones, and what we did was we actually utilized their paid search traffic, and we just basically took all the ads, we took what their control one was, we standardized everything across all of it, and we ran those four different types of messages. Everything was the same. All the four of those, whatever the ad groups were, whatever the landing page was going to, all
Mm-hmm.
that stuff stayed the same. It was just we had four, and we worked with data scientists to make sure that like everything was standardized, and we
Right.
had just that one message. That was the only thing in the ad that changed, was that one message. And we ran this until we had several, you know, million impressions for everything, and it was statistically significant. And we looked at the data, and we found overwhelmingly that what they had been using wasn't actually the thing that was moving the needle the most, that customers actually cared about.
What
They,
is-
yeah, it didn't do
It's like a mystery. I'm like,
yeah. So like, but this other concept, which was kind of similar but a little bit different,
yeah.
actually did a lot better. So one was, I'll kind of break it down. One example was it like a buy one get one kind of thing, which was kind
Mm-hmm.
of their control. That was the thing that they were doing. That was like their thing. Another one was the product like really comfy? or was
Mm.
it, did it, last a long time, or was it like really comfy or whatever? Like what was the quality is what I would say, like quality of the
Mhm.
product. The next was how sustainable was it? Like was it a
Right.
sustainable product?
Yes.
And then there was a fourth kind of secret sauce one, and that was something a little bit different. And so we had those four different concepts that were running, and the sustainability one did significantly better, to the point where
Oh,
the click-through rate was about 1% higher, which when you talk about millions of impressions, that adds up
yeah.
really
It
quick.
makes a
But the
difference.
VPC, the value per click, which
Yeah.
means that every single time someone clicks on that ad, that's the amount of value that is, was double. That means
Ah.
that all their ads just brought them
Yeah.
double. It was insane. And so then the conversion rate was significantly higher on that one too, which obviously, the VPC. So we're like, okay, but here's the thing. We then boiled it down. We parsed all the data and we looked through it and we narrowed it down to a product level as well. And we were able to
Right.
see for every product which one did better. And for the most part, it was consistent, like maybe 60-70% of the time, obviously, because it has to be, because for there's an overall winner. However, there were some products that were deviated quite heavily, and
Mm-hmm.
again, it was statistically significant enough where we're like, wow, okay, this is interesting. So now
Yes.
what we were able to do is we were able to take that messaging, and obviously we did further iterations of all of this, and we just kept testing it. But as a brand, let's try massaging our messaging to be more in that direction that was winning. And then on a product level, we then
Mm-hmm.
took all of the winners for all of that and started saying, okay, how can we change the copy of the landing page? How can we change the photography of the landing page? How can we change the email opt-ins and everything, and what kind of content that they're seeing, all to be curated around that messaging? What is that going to do to the buyer, the customer journey? How is that going to optimize that further?
Mm-hmm.
So we're constantly looking for ways in which we can use data to try and verify some of these assumptions. And going back to the health aspect, is that there were a lot of these teams that consistently, not only now in the
Mm-hmm.
consulting the last couple of years, but what I've seen just over the last like 17 years working with people, is that they feel really demoralized. I mean, everyone has a story about, yeah, my boss, like he's just doing these terrible things, and my company wants to do this, and I was telling them that they need to do this for this reason, and they're just not listening to me. Everyone has had people that they know that says that or experience
Yeah.
that themselves. But the thing is like that often is very true. Sometimes people just like to complain, but other times like they legitimately are right. The company is making poor decisions. Now sometimes that can be, there's a whole lot of information that you might not be privy to,
Mm-hmm.
and there's a lot of other things. That's a whole nother conversation about incentive. But like,
Yes.
if you're a VC backed company, you got a whole lot of responsibility that is now on your plate as a founder, and a lot of people in the company might not understand that. But that said, let's say for example you're saying, hey, this marketing campaign, like we have holiday sales coming up, for example, Black
Mm-hmm.
Friday, whatever else, holidays, we want to do things, and they're like, well, I think we should do this. And the marketing director saying, I think we should do this, and you're like, actually no, I think this is really going to work. We saw a lot of good results. They're like, no, 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 like I think we should go in this direction. And then they just kind of, that creates a lot of friction and a lot of demoralization. And if you apply that endlessly, you are having this culture of like, I feel.
Yeah.
And I can't tell you, it's been multiple companies, I've had people almost verbatim be like, I'm so sick of hearing like I feel, and then they'll say like a bad idea, and
Right.
when they'll say it right before trying to justify a bad idea, and people get fed up with it. After a
Mm-hmm.
while, they just either emotionally check out and they just
Yeah.
treat it like a job, and that's bad for a lot of reasons, both from a mental health standpoint and from the business, or they get so frustrated they just leave. Then your
Right.
turnover increases. Then you got to rush to hire somebody else. You
Yeah.
lost all the learnings, and if your business is that poorly organized, you probably don't have a repository of all of your marketing learnings and data and all that other stuff. So like then you lost all that. It's
Yes.
surprising to me how many people don't like really keep like a log of what's working and what's not. They just kind of in
Mhm.
the algorithm of people's heads. But what happens if you have turnover and that person leaves? It's just
Yeah.
gone. So
Cost
then you
is.
got to spend, it's just lost. So then you got to spend all this time relearning the same things over and over again. I've come in and working with businesses and we're 2 months in and they're like,
Mhm.
oh yeah, there was that big, huge audit like report that we had done and we spent like $100,000 on it. And I found out, I'm like, this is just sitting in a Google
Oh
Drive
my,
somewhere or Dropbox. And I'm like, are you
no.
kidding me? And then the employees are like, that's news to me as well. And everyone's like, how did you? And then like, it's just crazy.
Yes.
And so what that more or less does is it helps stop that negative feedback loop where now
Right.
instead Ray Dalio talks about this a lot in his book Principles, what he did with Bridgewater Capital, which is a shining example of like a holistic sustainably run business. The way that he ran it is an idea meritocracy where
Mhm.
the ideas get thrown out there and they are vetted on the merit of their worth and how effective they are. And that's more or
Mhm.
less what we're constantly trying to do with these brands. And we're using often a lot of the marketing channels to help gather the data and do what I call like assumption testing.
Mhm.
And so then everybody throws out ideas and we find really quick MVP, like minimum effective dose, minimum viable products to test these
Understood.
things. And then we go with the winner and we iterate off of it. And like
Mhm.
that's how things should be, like there's a sprint focus. Very rarely in practice is it done. It's usually just like, I feel we need to do this, let's do that. And I think a lot of leaders think that that makes them like decisive and effective. It does
Yes.
not at all.
Yes.
And you're just deluding yourself.
Yeah, so hands down, I agree. Data has so many valuable insight that we can leverage, but it's so overlooked. I'm actually a product manager, and I have to deal with a lot of like founders and different stakeholders who always say, "I feel this feature is so important. We really need it," and I'm like, okay, where's the data behind it? And it's
Yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah.
what? First of all, I always ask why, and I keep on asking why, and then they keep on responding, and then they even realize what they're saying it may not be true, and then I say, okay, where's the data behind it? And then they don't have the data, and then they realize, yeah, maybe this feature that I'm asking is not the right one because it's driven by, I feel like this is what clients want, but I'm like,
Mhm.
no, but where's the data behind it to back it up so that we can make sure that we create right features for the product? So you were talking totally my language, and I totally understand everything you said. And I agree 100% that we need to have more of a data-driven approach in order to make the right decision for even for our own lives or for our organization, for our product, whatever we do. It's always good to do the research and have the data to back you up. So good for you guys that you guys are doing that at PureWebResults.
Yeah, 100%. Whatever we can do to try and make these teams more sustainably ran, I'm always trying to figure out how we can kind of push the needle a little bit farther and just make it remove as much friction as possible. Because like the situation you're describing,
Yes,
I'm just like, oh, that's just so much wasted effort,
it
Yeah,
is.
yeah.
So I hear you. So yeah, I'm glad to hear about the data-driven approach. So I'll move on to now the second, topic of our conversation is about the healthy lifestyle for e-commerce entrepreneurs. For me, health is definitely wealth. Like I just am so focused on health. If we take care of our mind, body, soul, we can definitely perform well in our business, in our lives. We can deal with like all kinds of challenges, whether they be customer related or personal related. And recently I did was a talk about effective morning habits to empower e-commerce entrepreneurs. And I know for you, being healthy as an entrepreneur is super vital. I'm very curious now to hear about your habits and rituals that you do on a daily basis to ensure that your health stays intact.
Yeah, so I strive. I strive. I don't always do it every morning, but I try as much as I can. So
Right.
usually wake up and let my dog Hamilton out. He's
Ah,
a
okay.
German Shepherd Greyhound, so he looks like a German Shepherd. He just stretched like he's just very very tall and slender boy. But I let him out, and then usually I'll make some coffee. What I've been doing lately is getting on a sauna. So I'll start the sauna, which takes about 15-20 minutes to kind of get going. While I'm
Yes.
doing that, I will usually make like a big glass of water with some like Himalayan sea salt just to try and get some
Oh,
electrolytes in there.
yeah.
Um, so I'll do that. Maybe I put a little bit of lemon juice in it,
Yes. Yeah.
and just a little splash of that, and just try and hydrate because I'm about to sweat a lot,
Yes.
and
In the sun.
I'll do that. Yeah, and then I'll get kind of a bullet journal, and I'll just kind of it's about 4 or 5 lines, and I'll just kind of put like, what am I thinking or feeling? You know,
Ah,
I'm so
okay.
inspired by Marcus Aurelius's Meditations. That has been one of the most impactful books. I keep a copy, and like I've got like 2 or 3 bags I carry depending on. Got like a heavy day bag, like weekend backpack,
Yes.
and then I've got kind of like just a sling like day bag, and then I got like a really small one if I'm just like going on a hike or something. I keep a version. I keep a small copy of Meditations, all three, just because sometimes I'm just
Oh,
like I'll just like read a page,
yes.
and it's like it's a grounding principle. So like sometimes I'll read a page of that or something. I've kind of gotten out of the habit of that lately. Mostly I've just been doing my own kind of bullet journals, and then
Mm.
I usually get in the sauna as for as long as I can take it,
Of course.
and then I'll get out. I'll take a cold shower and ice shower, and then I'll usually from there like some more water. And if I hadn't made coffee already, like then
Mm.
I'll make coffee then.
Yeah.
I'm a tea addict. I'm a total tea nerd.
Oh,
So I'll
I'm a tea
usually
person too.
yeah.
Woohoo!
Yeah, so I usually will get a kettle going for that. The
Yeah.
tea is, I might have a little, sorry, the coffee, I might have a little bit of that, but it's usually like for my partner.
Yes.
And so, yeah, I mean that's pretty much like my morning routine, and then I'll have some meetings or whatever else. We have a kind of a daily stand up with the team around like 11
Mm.
a.m. or so. So like then we'll kind of lead into that. I might do like a short meeting or something with somebody, particularly if there's people that are like over in Europe or something where there's a pretty extreme time zone difference. I'll usually do
Yes.
that around like 10 or so before
Yeah.
just to kind of get that out of the way. And then, yeah, we'll have that kind of daily stand up. And that's pretty much how I start a lot of my days. And sometimes I do, sometimes I skip the sauna. Sometimes I skip the journal or whatever. But
Yeah.
so one of the things I realized I just missed is I'll try and meditate.
Mm.
Usually after I get out of the shower for like 10
Right.
minutes, and I found that like it is a lot easier for me um, to be able to effectively meditate after I have that kind of like cortisol release from
Oh,
the sauna and the meditation. And I've just found personally, like if you're someone who does meditation but sometimes struggles with it, where you're just like you're so in your head, it's almost like the engine is going so
and it
much.
doesn't stop.
Yeah, it's just it's so hard even to focus, and then you start getting irritated with yourself because you're not able to actually just calm down. One
Right.
of the things I'd recommend is honestly just buying a sauna. You can buy like $100 sauna. No kidding. It's like a tent that has like almost like an industrial humidifier that it
Right.
plugs into it. It's like $100 in Amazon. Just put in like sauna in Amazon. It'll show right up.
Yeah.
I would stay away from the infrared ones
Okay.
because the infrared ones, if the more expensive ones, like there's one I think it's called Relax Sauna or something. I have no affiliation with them, but
Yes.
there's like a Relax Sauna. I think that's like $1,300, and then some of the bigger wooden infrared ones. Those seem to be fine. I mean, brand, varying by brand, but those seem to be more fine. But some of the really cheap ones on Amazon, um, they're just kind of sketchy. I've seen a lot
Mm.
of people that have used like certain meters and just be like, man, this thing's off the with radiation. It's just off the. I don't know. It just I would be real skeptical of some of the cheaper ones, and they also don't seem to actually get your core body temperature that much higher. And
That's
so a lot of these people are just talking about, oh, you're sweating so much. And like, if you look at what Dr. Rhonda Patrick, a lot of the research she's been doing on saunas and a lot of the studies that have been done is that your core body temperature has to get, I think, up to like 102 or something like that, or it has to raise by 2 degrees or something. I forget what it is. I
yes.
forget exactly what the metric is, but a lot of these kind of cheaper infrared ones, they just don't get your body temperature even remotely elevated enough. The sauna though, the actual steam saunas is what I use. They certainly can. I actually kind of hacked mine where I got 2 of them going,
Right.
and I get it very high. I think it gets up to like 175 or something in there,
Oh
plus with the
my
steam.
God.
Yeah, and
Really?
plus with the steam, like 180, 170, just hot is hard, but with the steam, it makes it
That is
like
hard. Yeah.
crazy. But I'm insane, so but I love it. So I'll do that, and then afterwards with the cold shower. Afterwards, it's just like, wow, I am awake, but it's a calming.
Mhm.
It's almost like a calm energy.
Yes, it
Then
is.
I can just relax and actually really get a lot deeper into meditation. Now, it's not
Yeah.
to say that, if I sat there, I probably couldn't get myself in a good state just by meditating. But what I find is that my, almost like the ROI on the meditation is much, much higher because I can get in a much better state. And I feel
Yes.
like it's a lot more effective after having that. And so what I'll do often is like if I have days like yesterday where I was pretty much on back-to-back calls or interviews or
Yes.
whatever through for like 9 hours straight with very few breaks in between,
Hmm.
which was insanity. But like if that happens, then I'll just get in the sauna and then take a cold shower and then meditate. And then afterwards I am like, oh, I can focus. And
Yes.
like that is the thing that I wish I would have been aware of much, much, much sooner. I think that would have stopped me from like having the ulcer. I think that would have stopped me from having a lot of
Mm.
things because it's a negative feedback loop and it's really
Yes.
bad. And the one thing I'll say that was kind of an aha moment for me, and maybe
Yeah.
it'll be for somebody listening, was how cortisol really works. So when you're like super stressed, it's just a quick analogy. I believe it was Robert Sapolsky in Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers, which is an amazing book on basically how the body works and how stress works,
Hmm.
and in the how the central nervous system works. But it might have been somebody else, so don't quote me on the Robert Sapolsky, but
Yeah.
that is still a great book. But I believe there was it was either him or somebody similar that was basically saying that they observed that like a rabbit, for example, and he's using this as an analogy, is that
Hmm.
there was a rabbit that they observed in the wild, and it was very afraid because it got startled by something, either the
Hmm.
person or like a deer or a wolf or something. I don't forget. And it got startled, and it just jolted down a rabbit hole, and it was hiding. And then a couple minutes later, it kind of peeked its head out, looked around, was like, everything's fine, okay. And then it went out and started jumping in the air and kicking its legs and going crazy. And it
Oh,
was,
wow.
and what they observed, they're like, oh, it's got all that adrenaline going through its system. It's trying to get it out. Like it's trying to
Mm.
exert all that
Yeah.
energy. And the thing is we don't have that in our culture. We have an always on culture where everybody is like super stressed and super always on, and there's very few releases. And like if you're, and
Mhm.
I found that like a lot of founders and entrepreneurs almost like, so it's weird. It's almost like half of them are really, really into exercise, and the other
Yeah.
half like don't ever do it ever.
Yeah.
And I think
Yep.
that the path that don't ever do it ever are doing a huge disservice to themselves. But one really easy way that can be pleasant, if you're just like, hey, I just hate cardio, I hate exercise, I hate lifting weights or whatever. I don't have time to go running or whatever else.
Right.
Get a sauna, because then you can go in it, and actually 20 minutes in a sauna, if you get it hot enough, it basically mimics 20 minutes of extreme cardio.
Yeah.
So, and then you take that cold shower, whoo, you're lit. So like I'm like, wow, okay, that the whole thing with the rabbit, like just getting it out, like
Yeah.
that's me
And
going into
getting
a
it.
sauna, and afterwards I'm like, okay, I'm cool, I'm good, I had my thing. So yeah, that would be my daily routine and my extended thoughts on all that.
I think I've read so many books about morning routine and, listened to YouTube videos about morning routine. I've never heard about the sauna, but after listening to you, incorporating sauna in the morning routine totally makes sense. Oh my God. And I didn't even realize how, cost effective it is until you
Yeah.
just mentioned it. And so I think that's amazing. Yeah, the key thing is that we have all this energy inside us, and sometimes they're negative energy, like the stress, like you mentioned, anxiety, and we tend to hold on to it. But we as humans need to let that go, and by going to the sauna or exercising, you're letting that go through, we'll say sweating and deep breathing, and it's so important to do that. And I'm so glad that you brought that up, that everyone needs to have that release and let that go. And I like the idea of doing it through a sauna, why not? You can sit in the sauna. You can also meditate while you're in the sauna. That's what I usually do.
Yeah.
Whenever I go in for 15, 20 minutes, I just close my eyes and I literally just meditate in the sauna. So I'm, two birds with one stone. And so why not, but I also love the idea that you could do the meditation afterwards, as you mentioned, after the cold shower. And I think that makes total sense, because you've just released all this like negative energy, or like this, strong energy that was within you. So you're lighter. And so when you go into your meditation, you can go in a lot deeper.
Absolutely.
So it makes total sense why, you found meditation after your shower being very effective.
Yeah,
So
I've tried doing it like you, like during, and sometimes I can, but it's really hard because like usually I'm already like really in my head.
okay.
And it's almost like it's particularly like when your heart rate starts getting elevated and elevated and
Mhm.
elevated, and you start getting like, you're just like, and you're just like, focus on the breath. And like I use the Waking Up app by Sam Harris. I got Sam Harris being like, just look for the one that is looking. And I'm just like, and I'm just sweating. And I'm like, this is not good. So usually what I'll do, is I'll listen to like a podcast, or I will, listen to an audiobook or something like that. And I'll get a
Yeah.
lot of ideas, because you're sitting there and you're like in fight or flight, like a healthy high fight or flight mode, and your brain's going, and I'm listening to this, and I'm like, listening to somebody talk, I'm like, oh, I got all these ideas. And what I'll actually do, what's cool about the sauna that I have, is that it's got a little zipper on it, and you can just reach your hand, and it's got these little pockets on the front, and it's got
Wow.
one where I put my phone, and then I got another one for like a little like waterproof, it's pretty cool, it's pretty cheap, you can get it on Amazon. It's like a waterproof pad and
Yeah.
pen, and I'll
Yeah.
just write an idea down real quick, and then I'll
Ah,
just like put it back. And like honestly, like I got the portable sauna at first just to test it out and see how I like
right.
it. And then I'm like, okay, well, I'm gonna get a barrel, so I was about to buy a house, and then the COVID thing dropped, and like
Yeah.
I was just like, I'm gonna wait a little bit. And so like I just doubled down and got a bigger portable one, and I got a second unit, and just kind of hacked it to put two of them in there. And then next year I get a house, I'll probably have a actual barrel sauna installed. It's just such a pain to have that thing like transported and installed. I'm like, I'm not doing that here. That's not gonna work. But even still, honestly, I've been in so many steam saunas. Those things for $100, they're great. They're amazing. So like, yeah, I would totally do it. But you have all those ideas, and they just come to you. Some of the best ideas that I have are in the sauna, just like listening to a podcast or an audiobook or something. So yeah, if there was one like kind of practical life hack, like I wish I could tell my former self or tell somebody now, it's honestly the sauna personally.
I love it. I think that's a fantastic idea. And it's true, all these ideas can come at any point. And I like the idea of having that waterproof pad that you mentioned, and
Mhm.
then, just jotting it down right away, so that you don't forget it. Because sometimes there's so many thoughts that come and go. And if we don't jot it down as fast as we can, sometimes then we forget it. And so I
Mhm.
love that you're prepared, and you have that ready, during your sauna time. So, oh my God, after this call, I am definitely going to look into saunas.
uh, just go there. It's like that Tim Ferriss effect. They're just sold out.
Okay, so my last question on this round is about, you mentioned earlier, is about burnout, and that is something that a lot of us are facing, and especially e-commerce, entrepreneur. And with this global pandemic, people are just getting burnt out really quickly. And so, any last words on, how to stay healthy and avoid burnout, just in general, for e-commerce entrepreneurs?
Yeah. So I think there's two things.
Mhm.
One is take care of yourself. This is
Yeah.
something that I've historically been very bad at,
Yes.
because I tend to get really wound up, and I
Yes.
tend to just be like mission focused and just be like, I'm gonna do the thing, and I'm like sprint, sprint, sprint on to the
Yeah.
next thing, and then I'll find myself on the other end of that sprint and just be exhausted. And
Yeah.
like what I've just kind of realized is like how burning the candle at both ends like that really is just doing myself and also everybody around me and like my team, anybody I'm working with, like really quite a disservice. So take care of yourself.
Yeah.
And another podcast I was on recently, I was talking about, they asked me about having a therapist. and like if I would recommend it for
Mhm.
entrepreneurs. And I was just like,
Mhm.
yes, absolutely. A lot of entrepreneurs are like, march to beat their own drum. I'm a strong person. I don't
Yes.
need this. I would say you are doing yourself a massive disservice.
Right.
Okay, so like if you're a king or like some sort of emperor, like they had their council, right? And if you're running a company, you usually have a board.
Yes.
Why would you not want that for your own life? Like it makes no sense to me. I've never understood the
Mhm.
stigma of the weakness or whatever.
Yeah.
Of that. And the one thing I would say is I've really struggled. I've had a lot of therapists over the years, and PhDs, clinical psychologists, and I've had some of them have been amazing, but the one thing that I felt like was kind of lacking a lot of the time was their understanding of how the business world works, and to truly help give me some actually like really good feedback on how to navigate a lot of these issues
Mhm.
personally and professionally.
Mhm.
And the thing that I wish I would have done a lot earlier was try and cultivate like some sort of mentorship with people and have
Mhm.
somebody. And you could either find that through like paying a consultant or advisor or coach or whatever else. There's some great ones out there. There's also a lot of guru type people, so your mileage may vary on that front. But I think trying to, you could also get that by like joining kind of a community, even like the Slack channels we were talking about, finding a
Mhm.
community of like-minded entrepreneurs that hopefully have been in your shoes and are a little bit older, a little bit wiser, and getting their feedback. I think that is invaluable, and being vulnerable with them.
Mhm.
So I think that personally, having a therapist that you see and just getting like, how are you doing with your own mental health, and then having kind of almost like a professional therapist that you talk to. Uh,
Yes.
I, funny enough, find myself inadvertently doing that with a lot of my clients, because like a lot of the time, like as a consultant, I'm talking with them, getting to know them, and a lot of the time they feel like they have to be guarded among most of the people, or they feel like people don't really understand the problems that they're having. And so I feel like I've seen a strong need for that, where people are really open to it when the idea presents itself organically,
Mhm.
but they do not want to seek it out, and they don't want to say that they want it. And I think that just seeking it out would be a lot better, instead of waiting until the opportunity arises, which it may never will. I waited, and I just in Ohio, Dayton, we just really didn't have a lot of people that I gelled with that I felt like could teach me a lot. I mean, not to say there's
Yeah.
not a lot of great business owners around here, but like the kind of space that I was in. So I think that's all really good. And I think that the second thing is that, what is your purpose? And truly
Mhm.
asking yourself, what
Yes.
am I optimizing for? What
Mhm.
am I optimizing for in my life? What am I optimizing for in my business? And what are we as a team optimizing the business for? And I think those are all questions that I have like a monthly uh, kind of I don't know, self discovery touch base every like third or fourth Sunday. I forget. I think it's the third. And I
Mhm.
basically just spend like 3-4 hours. I just ask myself those questions to make sure I'm on par. And about once a year, typically very late December or early January, because everything's already shutting down anyway, with
Mhm.
holidays, and the world kind of goes to sleep. I'll usually take it. Started off as a week. This last December and January, I took about a month off, and I just got everything prepared, and I took a month off. And I actually stayed. Before I had been doing some traveling, like during the time that I would take off, but I just decided to
Mhm.
stay in and just completely be a hermit, and
Mhm.
just really have a touch base with myself, like, why am I doing what am I doing? Why
Yeah.
am I doing this? Does this align with
Yeah.
what I want? And I
Yeah.
asked myself, kind of inspired by Bowie, actually, by David Bowie,
Mhm.
when he that album he came out with, Black Star, was just amazing, and it inspired me. Like he like, hey, if you had a year to live,
Yes.
what would you do?
Yeah.
And he
It's a big
decided,
question.
yeah, he decided, I want to make this album and try and be like my final thing on the world, and I want to make a musical, because he always wanted to make a
Mhm.
musical. He tried in the '70s and he never got to do it, and he's like, I'm gonna make a
Mhm.
musical, and he did it. And to me, it's just, there's so much energy in that album, and I'm just like, oh wow, and that inspired me. And so
Right.
now, like around that time in early January every year, I take that time off, and I'm like, what if I had a year left to live? Like, what if like
Oh,
January 9th 2021 or whatever, or whatever. What if that was when I was going to die? And I don't mean that to be morbid. I mean that to just be a call to action and be like really putting the question, like, if you had a year left to live, what would you do? Like, would you?
It's such a powerful question. It's
Yeah.
so powerful. And it
So
gets you thinking, like, yeah, what would you do with your life?
yeah, and if what you would do, again, this goes back to what are you optimizing for? If
Hmm.
what you would do is completely different than what you're doing, then you need to reevaluate that. And I'm not
Yeah.
saying you stop what you're doing. Like, you can't live your entire life in 1 year sprints. I mean, depending on if you were like a trust fund kid, yeah, you probably could. But,
Yeah.
for most people, you can't do that, particularly if you're running a business with a team. However, it's it goes back to what are you optimizing for? Like, if you felt like after a year and that was it, lights out, would you feel good about the progress that you made?
Yeah.
And if you felt like you were just coasting and you just felt like you weren't really proud of what you're doing or alive, then like you need to reevaluate. You either need to realign. I would recommend that COVID notwithstanding, try and get out of town preferably, because you need to be in a place that
Mm.
you don't have any sort of familiarity with. It needs to be
Right.
someplace new. And just go by yourself if you can, and go somewhere. Go camping. You could do that now. Go off
Yeah.
and go camping. Do whatever. If you really feel like you are at a point where you're like, I don't know why I'm doing what I'm doing, take some time off, even if it's just a night, even if it's just a weekend. Go,
Hmm.
bring a pad and a paper, and bring a pair of headphones, and
Yes.
just uh, download a bunch of albums or whatever on Spotify or whatever else, and just turn everything on do not disturb mode, and just listen to whatever music's going to inspire you, and just ask yourself those questions. What am I optimizing for? And
Hmm.
if it's not aligned with what you're doing now, then you need to find ways in which you can realign your mission, your business, and your team with that North Star that you've now established,
Yeah.
or you need to exit and you need to find something. You need to do something else basically. And it's time. So that'd be my take on how to avoid burnout, because otherwise if you don't do that, it's only going to get worse. It's only going to compound, and it's not just going to affect you, it's going to affect your team, and it's going to affect their
Yeah.
family, it's going to affect everybody. And that is something that I feel like a lot of people don't really think about until it's too late. So be proactive.
Yeah, no, I think 100%. It came back to how you said earlier when you were talking about your inspiration behind Pure Web Result. You talked about the importance of why. And I love that you're constantly asking that question, because it's going to be your driving force, and it's your why will determine your thought, your action, your words that you use, your behavior, the values. And so it's super important to always take the time to ask yourself and then keep on asking yourself, and that's what you're advising. And I think that's fantastic advice. And I also really, really like, and I was surprised at listening, is having a therapist as an e-commerce entrepreneur. A lot of, business owners or CEOs or, entrepreneurs, they're like, no, I don't need a therapist. But no, you do, because the amount of things that you're dealing with every minute, the challenges, handling everything, like having a business is huge. There's a lot of responsibilities, a lot of, situations you'll have to deal with, and you need somewhere a safe environment where you can talk about them, right? And being with a therapist allows you that environment where you can share it. But my only thing is finding a therapist who also understands, being an entrepreneur. And I don't think there's that many therapists that truly understands that and that can help you really, grow as an entrepreneur. So that was a thought that I had while you were saying that. But I love the idea of entrepreneurs having a therapist.
Yeah, and don't let that be a bottleneck. Like, oh, I can't find one that understands me being an entrepreneur. It's like they don't have to. You can find that
Mm,
from, like I said, like a mentor, or from advisor or community or whatever else.
mm,
But there is that don't obviously, if you can find one that has that entrepreneurial experience, yeah, that's amazing. Go for it.
yeah.
However, don't let that be it. Don't let that hinder you. Don't let that
Yeah,
stop.
that's true. You're right. You're completely right. So, oh my God, so many awesome responses. Your responses are also honest and filled with so much wisdom that I am totally blown away right now. So, if it's okay, I'll just wrap up with just like one of my favorite parts is just a reflective round where you give very quick responses to that come straight from your heart. Like it has to come straight because I'm all about wisdom from the heart. And so I want to hear your responses to just 3 questions. And so for the reflective round, my first one is your favorite advice on e-commerce that you've received or want to share.
Huh.
They're quick. They have to be quick.
Rapid fire. I think it comes down to like more or less what can you do to optimize for the customer journey? Like don't think about it like the quickest way I can put it is like people do like conversion optimization and they do like CRO and they're optimizing for revenue or whatever. If someone lands on your website, what is it that you do? Why should they care? And how can you get that across as quickly as possible? And think about what happens to the customer. Here's the way I do it rapidly. A friend of mine, Rishi, he runs frictionless commerce, and this dude is like the Willy Wonka of e-commerce. He's amazing. He
Right.
says about at best you can get a 4% conversion rate on a first-time visitor,
Yes.
uh, but 11% are interested, but they're not ready to buy right now. And if you
Right.
don't capture that and you don't think about the journey, you're missing out on 11% every single time you have people coming to your website. So what can you
Right.
optimize for that? That would be like the aha thing.
Yeah, that's a good one. I really like that one. And the next question is, what's your vision or motto for your journey or your life?
Ooh, what would Bowie do?
Oh, he's your guiding North Star, isn't he?
He's the Black Star, man. Yeah.
Okay. And then what is currently bringing you joy?
That's sauna.
I love
Seriously.
it.
I hopped in. I had like two calls right before this, and I was just like, I am feeling like I was talking for like 3 hours. I'm just like, and I got in the sauna, took a cold shower, got dressed, and hopped on right before this. And I'm like, I feel alive. That thing is bringing me a lot of joy. The second thing I think is just I've been increasingly hopping on podcasts like this and connecting with people like you and having conversations that I think
Wow.
really actually matter. What's been
Yeah.
really really like uplifting for me is that I've been talking with particularly like a lot of e-com podcasts and they're like, hey, you want to talk about SEO or do you want to talk about like doing discounts or this and that? They want to talk about these very tactical things. And we'll hop on a quick call and just talk
Yeah.
about, what kind of topics we talk about. Every single time the mental health thing comes up,
Yeah.
everyone's, yes, I want to talk about that. And
Yeah.
I think that that is so cool. Like it
Yeah.
seems like the online entrepreneurial kind of founder e-com, this whole thing, the whole industry is starting to really be open up and be more vulnerable, and that is bringing me a lot of joy. And I'm
Yeah.
really excited to see over the next couple of years like where these conversations go. So it's really awesome that you're having these conversations. I really respect it, and it's been really fun talking with you. And I look forward to talking to you again.
Oh, I enjoyed it every single minute, this conversation. And honestly, you've inspired me to a whole new level. And a lot of the wisdom that you've provided is just really etched my soul. Like I'm very honest. I am a transparent girl and very, straightforward. And I really, honestly, Josh, appreciate everything you said today. And I just want to say thank you for this taking the time to talk to me for like an hour and a half. It was amazing. I'm so honored.
Wow, it
And
has been an hour and a half. That's awesome. This is the longest podcast I've been on so far, so that's awesome. I love it.
I only wish you the best, like truly, genuinely for you. You're definitely a leader that we all should definitely look up to, and I can only wish the best for you. So thank you so much.
Thank you, and same to you. Wish you the best.
Yeah.